Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here to talk Q&As, the live stream summary from last night. Thank you to everybody that tuned in, trying to get there on a Thursday night to talk teams and all your other questions, not just Supercoach related. I had some footy questions and really happy to start opening that up to more just general footy chat with you guys and share your thoughts on everything footy related. As I said, thank you to everybody that tuned in there. For those who can't, we'll just do a very quick recap of some of the main questions we had to try to help answer the last minute questions you have about your team. Before we do that, as always, continue to check us out on all our social media platforms, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 for the Twitter. And then we've got the SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, so all those good things. And thank you again to our sponsor, Splash Vodka, for their ongoing support of this podcast. So first question, and I'll just get into tonight's game. So we got Geelong-Richmond, which is 7:20, so be mindful of that. A couple of questions we got was about daily fantasy sports, in particular is Draft Stars that I play. Some really good cheaper options tonight. I'm all in on Geelong, naturally. I think they're going to do a bit of a number on us. The only two players I really like from Richmond are Taranto and Hopper, so I've managed to fit them into a team. And then the Geelong players I've picked around them is Hawkins and Simpson up forward, Atkins and Holmes in the midfield. I've got a Savava, Radigalia and Koljazian down back because I think there'll be a lot of intercept marks. Richmond are really missing those that presence of Tom Lynch there as half forward, and I've gone Blissarves in the ruck. Definitely can take Hopper out and go O'Connor instead of Koljazian, and then go, say, Isaac Smith, who usually does a bit of a number on the wings against Richmond. And then the other one is you can bring in Stewart. So I was playing with him instead of Sava, take out Hopper again, and then you can bring in Tanner Bruin. So I like those sort of options there. Usually somebody else that pops up, but yeah, I think I'm all in on the Cats, and I think they all look pretty solid options for that. So that answers that question. Quite a few questions naturally about VC and C. The safe play for me this week is Oliver and Dumont. So I won't be swapping off that. If you have Stewart or Anderson tonight, I think they're pretty obvious options there. So you can definitely loophole, especially for those people who are struggling with loophole options this week. It might be, say, you've got Johnson, so he's playing tomorrow. If you do have one of the Giants boys in Madden and Ralston, that does open up a lot more options because the Giants are playing the last game. Just be mindful if you have Madden, maybe put Tim English there on the bench as your emergency. Make sure you have that emergency on as well. A lot of people forget to do that, and I might just quickly do that anyway, just so people see. So that's sub English, there's Madden, comes on field, and then you make Madden the captain, but you make sure Tim English has the emergency there. Captain loophole done, very simple, but just always be mindful that, and also be mindful when you reverse your trades. It's definitely something that people do. So they go up there, they do all their undo changes, everything happens around that, and then you forget about your captain. It happens to so many people. So just something to be definitely mindful of. Had something about team value, so I think I'm sitting at 12,800,000. So a lot of the higher teams are ranked, probably close to that, getting close to that $13 million mark. So just sort of a little bit of thought around that. If that's not you, that's fine. But you might need to start having a look at how can you bring some cash into your team. And if that's maybe taking a few more risks, we definitely talked about some 530k options yesterday, and ranking Brayshaw, Steele and Mills were the most popular ones. I'm not as big a fan on Brayshaw just because their fixture coming up, so I did make note of that. I think they've got Geelong and Sydney twice in about the next 10 or 11 weeks, and maybe it's the D's as well, so wasn't that good. I can see the appeal of Mills, just the question is he going to spend a little bit more time defence, but definitely has the capacity to score. If I had to choose between them this week, I'd have Steele number one and then Mills. Mills is also not going to pick up forward status, so that was a defensive status. That was a question that we got asked quite a bit last night. That was 22% that he's sitting at, so definitely someone to ignore. But however, forward status, we've got Maxi Gawn 38% and Walsh 39%, so two players you've definitely got to consider as you go on. So definitely questions that were raised a lot. And then the rookies, naturally, between your Weddles, Nivets and Atkins seem to be the most popular. Will Gould is named, and that I don't like it long term. It does worry me there. maybe if McCartan just doesn't keep playing and he does well, maybe he could be sold. But just the way he's been played for so long now, I'd probably be worried about his job security. All these guys have bad job security. Weddle's the one we like best because the Hawks obviously are low. They're trying to put game time into all their young players, so he might find himself out at some point. But yeah, as somebody who looks like the better one. Atkins is very reliant on what happens if Will Powell and Ainsworth both come back, and then eventually Touk. So what's their sort of best 22? Is he a potential sub candidate? So there are some concerns around that because the Suns are outside of sort of Touk and Powell in particular. They're close to their not Powell. Weller. Yeah, when Weller comes back in, they're close to that best 22 makeup. And start of the year, Atkins wasn't part of that. He's kind of on the fringes, so there is a little worry there. I know nearly a third of the top 1% have brought him in this week, so a little bit more confidence that, you've got a lot of highly ranked players have brought him in, and it's got a good buy, and I think his scoring potential is actually really good. But it's just, I think his job security could be a real issue. But I don't mind people doing it if that's the option you want to go down. Nevitt, maybe not as much. We talked long about that. Dempsey's the obvious one that goes out for close. But but then what's the next option? Sort of when you you got Dangerfield, Gary Rowan. There was definitely another player of note there from Geelong who's going to come back in. That's escaped me. But they did have 3 or 4 players that have to come back in that side. So potentially it's Parford, but then I think it's Nevitt out there. So long-term security doesn't look that great. The thing that, as a Simpson owner, I'm really hoping that it's not Simpson has a bad game, Nevitt has a really good game, and then Nevitt's job security goes ahead of Simpson. So I wouldn't think that's probably the case because Simpson, they did play in that final series in 2020. But yeah, so you kind of want to back. You think they'd back him in the role that he's playing, but there's also potential. Stengel is the one, and that's where we thought originally it was Simpson and Stengel. But if Stengel was to come back, there is potential they play both. Nevitt, gets pushed out. So some questions around that. I know some people are looking at defenders. So the obvious cheapest ones, Zeeble, this is the last chance you've got to get him in if you want to. Sinclair's still a really popular one. For me, a lot of the answers come back down to your buys. I know people struggling with Walsh because it's that round 15 buy. I did talk about that in my team of the week, how you can potentially work around that, but that is going to be a tough one for people. So something to think about there. In regards to trade out, actually a couple more defenders we talked about was Jake Lloyd. Really like his buy and the role that he's playing at the moment. Houston's a bit of more of an issue because of that round 15 buy again, but has been scoring quite well. Luke Ryan, always worried about his body, but has been great, but obviously a little bit more expensive. And then you get into that 560 end where Lloyd, it's still more attainable. That round 15 buy issue again is with the Blues. Doherty 509, beautiful price, but then how do you manage that? So we did have some questions around them. Most people forward line is fairly solid. Marshall, we don't know a lot about yet. We're still waiting to see those final teams. And then Sunday, there's the potential that he could be pulled out. So that's why when I talked to my team trade discussion this week, it was I've only used the one trade, but with the potential that I can move Marshall to Gaunt if I really have to do that, if there was an update there. So we did have some talk around that as well. In regards to trade out options, Chandler does average 90 at the MCG this year. He's beautiful scores. He's kicked 3 goals 3 times there, so something to consider about not trading him out. Ashcroft's the popular one that a lot of people are trading out. Break even of 71. Because of Parrish's injury, that probably opens up more points available in that game, and you'd think Ashcroft can rebound and probably get a 70. It's not going to restart his cash gen, so he can be somebody to move on. He's just more that sort of guy that can score well, a bit like some people who've kept Ruben Jimby. He's still going his 60s, and each week he's making his break even. I feel like Ashcroft could be that guy who just plotters around that 70 mark. Not somebody we need to move necessarily at the moment, and just potentially is fine in our side. It's a player that I'm looking at maybe moving next week with the extra cash that I now have through my trade this week as an option. So they're the most popular. 2 of the more discussed ones because of their value. Your McKenna's, your Wilmots, definitely probably players I'll be moving on first. I've personally gone with JVR, even though he's cleared of that suspension, most likely to start dropping cash this week. So unless he has a massive game against the Hawks. So there, guys, I know a lot of people are struggling with the amount of sort of dead rookies they've got on their bench, something that naturally has to be thought about. The hope is Constable. I know he's still not named on the emergencies, but at some point gets an opportunity. Chesser could be sub this week. Johnson's back next week, so I think that'll start clearing up for people. But if people do want to downgrade and start bringing in a couple of these other rookies, yeah, I can understand that completely, why you'd want to do that. So we had some discussion around that, a little bit of chat more, and then about sort of Brewing and Horn Francis and all those situations, which I really enjoyed. So you get all that's on that live stream if you want to look at that for more, but from a Supercoach perspective, yeah, they were the key questions there. So, and as we're coming into the buys, it's really hard to, like, without people, like last night they were asking about specific questions with their specific questions about their team, and that's the thing when you are asking them and sending me the messages, which I'm happy to answer. Be mindful of actually talking about, have you thought about your buys, and that does give me a easier, and Ben and Chris are the same, easier to answer those questions when you're asking it, because that's what we're sort of thinking. Okay, how many buy players do you have there? For those who have Supercoach Gold, it does make it a lot easier. It's up here in the show buys, and you can just click on it, and there's your round 12s and your round 15s, which is the one which is really horrific for people to deal with. If you don't, naturally you can go to the pen and paper strategy and write them down, and that gives you a bit more idea. So during those buy rounds, you've got your best 18 playing. And it's still the same thing. So if you've got 6 forwards, you can't play 8 forwards. But because we've got so many dual position players in the forward line, you might be able to move them into the midfield and have those bench players come on. So, I know a few people have been caught out that in the past. They might have 8 defenders. It's like, well, you actually can still only play 6. So you've got to be mindful of, it's still the same rules. It's your best 18 on field out of that 22, but you can't just use your emergencies for a line that you've got no need to use emergencies. And our best way to probably show that is round 13, which I'm not missing anyone but Simpson at the moment, and Constable. So hypothetically, in my forward line, if Mitchell and Roberts were playing, which we know Robertson's not playing, but let's just say I was trying to use them, they won't count because all 6 players on my forward line are playing. So it's just something to be mindful then when we get to that. So yeah, all these little things that people are starting to think about, and buys is a great opportunity to really boost your rankings, opportunities to take risks. If you're finding that you don't have many round 12s or even round 13, great round to target. If you've got some Geelong guys in mind, or even Gold Coast Suns, that's where Anderson, Stewart, your Simpsons. I know some people are looking at Nevitt and hoping he can keep his job security, not as much. Maybe Jeremy Cameron, Hawkins, all those sort of players. They're going to really serve you well come around 14, 15 when people are going to be scrambling to get the best 18 up. And that's ways to also target maybe of winning the weekly score. If you think your ranking's horrific and you're not really playing for anything, well, maybe you can adjust your side so it's really good for round 14 and 15 and bring in a lot of those round 12, 13 players. Also, if you play just for leagues and head-to-head, have a look at some of the matchups you've got going. So I always like to think, well, this year it's 4 rounds of buys, but let's remove round 13, Gold Coast Geelong. So I'm trying to win 2 out of those 3 if I'm just playing for leagues. So you might load up on round 15, guys. Go, okay, I'm going to lose that round, but I'm going to make sure I win round 12 and 14, so I'm still in a good position on the ladder. So yeah, that's a bit of thought for those players that play some serious leagues, and I know people play cash leagues and stuff like that, or for some good trophies and stuff. So definitely consider that. But outside of that, they were the main questions that we discussed. Obviously, went into a lot more depth over a 2-hour show, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an answer as we're looking into the round ahead. So all the best for your super coaching, and we will talk soon.